Hello, hello. How's it going, everybody? I wanted to do a little video because I was looking over some old benchmarks from the AMD Radeon RX 580. And one of the things that I noticed is that on these benchmarks, a lot of the times, they're always saying that the Nvidia cards are doing a lot better. Well, I've been running an Nvidia 1070 for quite a while now. And one of the things that I noticed is I get a ton of screen tearing with the Nvidia 1070. Playing games, screen tearing. Using KDE Plasma, screen tearing. Some things like in Plasma don't really work correctly, like the compositor. If you use X-Render, then everything works fine. But if you try to use, something that interfaces with the graphics card, like OpenGL, it doesn't work right. It'll crash. It'll cause like some blurry fonts, and just does a whole bunch of things. And this has been an issue that's been going on for like 5 years or something like that. I reported a bug, a long time ago. Other people have done the exact same thing, but it's just one of those things. It seems like I haven't really delved too deeply into the code because I'm not experienced in the graphics stack. I don't really know what the problem is, but it's clearly a problem. So what I wanted to do was compare actual experience of using the two different brands of cards. So now I think this probably will apply to all AMD cards and all Nvidia cards, at least the more recent ones. But obviously, if it's like a 2080 versus a 5700 XT or whatever, those are different cards, right? And they're going to have different idiosyncrasies between the two of them. So, but I picked this card up. I have the AMD card in the system right now that's recording this, and I picked that card up off eBay for a little over $100. And at the time when I got this, I bought this for probably, I want to say, maybe $450, $500 at the time. I got it pretty close to launch, not right at launch. Before that, I was using an R9 290, and I had a self-contained water loop cooler, like one of those CPU coolers, on that R9 290, and it worked great. But it was a little slow trying to play games. And one thing that I noticed, I'll just go over some of the differences with AMD. Now, first off, right when you boot into Ubuntu or Linux, I'm using Ubuntu, so I'm going to use that as my example. So right when I booted into Ubuntu, everything just kind of worked. I had to, run an update, reboot one time, and then everything worked fine. Immediately I could run games, and I noticed just everything was smoother. I could go into the settings. I could, go to compositor, and I could turn on my compositor. And now my compositor works fine. It's at OpenGL 3.1. And I'm not sure if you can see this on the video, but when I'm moving this across the screen, it just looks pretty good. There's no screen tearing. The window's not going in two different directions. It just looks good. When you minimize the window, it works great. And even in games, I noticed just everything just seems smoother. So, I mean, that's one of the things that perhaps you're not going to be able to see when you're, looking at just these benchmarks. These benchmarks don't talk about all those other things that you're going to get from using an AMD card on Linux. We'll just go over these benchmarks real quick, and then I'll show you inside the game to show you what that looks like. So if you look at these benchmarks, the 580 is right here, and it's saying you're going to get 438 frames per second on Dirt Rally. Well, first off, that's just a crazy amount of frames. that's at 1080p. So if you go to a harder game, let's go to a different game, because I'm running at 4K. If you go to Dota 2, you're going to get 61 frames per second, which is, right at that cutoff point where I consider it to be, usable. And the 1070 is at 110. So I mean, that looks like a huge jump. I mean, granted, I think the 1070 probably still costs more than the 580, but that seems like, it's a no-brainer. This card's going to be way better. But just because it's going to get more frames in the game, I would say it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be better. So if we go to, say, the R9 Fury, it's getting about the same 61 at 4K, but using Vulkan instead of OpenGL. And the 1070, again, gets about 103. So either way, it seems like the NVIDIA card's going to be better. You're gonna have a better experience. You're gonna get more frames. It's just gonna outperform AMD's cards. But again, my experience is just different. And you'll go and you'll look at all these benchmarks, and they all say the exact same thing. They say the NVIDIA cards are much better than the AMD cards. You're gonna have more frames, and we can go through. And this is from 2017, so it's pretty old, and it's still the same thing. And I know AMD's cards are, some of the drivers tend to be improved throughout time, and even 3 or 4 years down the line, you can still get improvements in your hardware just because of changes in the software. So I mean, yeah, you can go. This is 1080p, and it's still 580 is getting 78, but the 1070 is getting 165. And that's on Tomb Raider. So we'll go performance per watt. And again, Dota 2, CPU usage throughout. Looks like the 580 less is better. We go to the 1070. The 1070 seems to be a little bit higher. So, less CPU usage, most of it's going to the 580. So, I mean, maybe that's one thing that it did a little bit better on. Looks like the GPU temperatures, the 580's a little bit better. So, maybe out of the box, the temperatures are going to be better with the 580. But I mean, I can show you with P sensors, and I'll put the NVIDIA card in, and I'll show you what it looks like. But the temperatures that I was seeing for the CPU are, and this is the one you have to go by right here, is the AMD card seems to run hotter. Now, I have it in a very tight enclosed space, and it's always going to be pretty hot in this kind of case that I'm running it in, because I plan on putting this into a server rack. So it's in a server case right now. So yeah, right now it's ramped up pretty high because I'm using OBS, but usually it runs about 44 degrees to 41 degrees Celsius, and then the NVIDIA card will run about the same. I think the NVIDIA card usually runs about 2 degrees cooler in my experience, but it's generally pretty much the same. So yeah, but that's on just, barely any desktop usage, just browsing. We can go into the different temperatures when you're actually gaming later. But if we go to another benchmark, it looks like, frames per second, per watt, more is better. We got the 580 way down here. And so, yeah. If you're looking at this and you're thinking, oh yeah, NVIDIA cards are so much better, that's what I don't really understand about these benchmarks. These benchmarks don't tell you your experience on the desktop. They don't tell you your experience inside the game. Like, if you're getting a ton of screen tearing, but you're getting higher frames per second, does that really count? You know? And I can show you my Nvidia settings. I have synced to VBlank, full screen repaints, but we'll go all over that. We'll go over that stuff. Basically, it's just not, it's not as good. But let's just launch a game real quick. We'll go to Tyranny because it's a newer game, not super intensive. I don't even know if it's going to be able to run with this plan. But again, usually on Nvidia, you're going to be seeing some screen tearing even on this starting video. And this is the open source AMD driver, and you don't get any of that. So not only is it, you know, cheaper, it's open source on Linux, and it's working fantastic. So now this is made with Unity. They're probably using, you know, OpenGL or Vulkan or something like that, just depending on which platform it's on. This game takes a little while to get started. But I can even show you on a different game. I'll load up Diablo 3 because I have that running with crossover, and we'll see how that goes. We'll compare the two. Now I pretty much beat this game. I haven't installed the expansions on this game yet, but this game has pretty much been beaten. It is a really fun game, and I'm kind of sad that it was so short. You know, I really like games like Baldur's Gate, and that game's just massive, especially if you have, you know, 1 and 2, and then all the expansions, TOB, and then you can even have like user-created mods and stuff like for extra content. It just makes that game so massive. And this game was really fun, a really cool story, but it just ended too quick. I feel like it was just starting to pick up speed and get more exciting, and then the game pretty much ends. I was like, need a Tyranny 2 or something. So now keep in mind, I'm recording at the same time, but even as I'm scrolling across the screen, normally it's a lot smoother when I'm doing that. But I think because I'm recording a video at the same time, it's a little bit slower, but it's pretty good. When the people are running, it's a little bit slower, but I can tell we're dropping some frames here, I'm thinking. But still, if you were moving side to side, this action, what you'd be seeing when you're playing like this is a lot of screen tearing in Nvidia, but not the AMD card. And my monitor is a FreeSync monitor, I should say, and so that is enabled right now, but even with it disabled, there was no difference. It still wouldn't tear with the AMD card, but then with the Nvidia card, there would be a lot of screen tearing. And this is the open source driver, guys. This isn't the AMD GPU Pro driver. This is one literally just came from the kernel when I booted up Ubuntu. So, now I mean, we're not doing anything super crazy here, obviously, but I don't think you can even cast any spells in this. So we'll jump out of this game because there's not really much else to see here. But just wanted to show you like a very intensive application, and you're not seeing any screen tearing. And this is going to be the same experience that you're gonna find with, you know, any other game that you play. So you go to try to play, you know, your Tomb Raider game. You go to try to play, you know, whatever games that you own, and on AMD, it's going to work fine. I don't see. That's what I really don't understand what's up with these benchmarks. So I'm just going to leave the AMD part there, and we'll get into more of the graphs and comparing the two from gaining more, you know, mathematical metrics. But really, the user experience is not something you can necessarily measure unless you have, you know, a bunch of extra equipment. You're measuring the screen tearing from some other device. But I guess if your video recorder can capture that, then yeah, you'd be capturing it. But I'm sure you're going to see the screen tearing and the artifacting and all these other problems that happen with without a lot of manipulation. Now, this is a Gaming 7, Gigabyte Gaming 7 motherboard X399, and it's got AMD Threadripper 1950X. And everything was running really well with this. I had to update the BIOS because I was getting some kernel errors, but now, as you can see, there's no errors. Everything is working as it should. And yeah, before, when I was on the Nvidia card, my log files were getting out of control. But yeah, I'll just stop this part here, and we'll pick it up with the Nvidia card in a minute. All right, one more thing that I wanted to cover real quick was Diablo 3. So this is running with, you know, Wine crossover. I'm still on the AMD card. We'll just launch that real quick. And this game is pretty old, but it's still a good indicator because, I mean, I'm recording. We're running through Wine, which takes a little bit overhead, not a ton, but a little bit. Now, I haven't tested this after upgrading. I literally just upgraded from 1910 to 20.04, and this is still considered to be beta, actually, for Ubuntu. So, yeah, let's just join a game, see what happens. Now, I am noticing it is a little bit slow, but I'm not noticing any screen tearing. I think it's just slow because I'm recording at the same time. All right, so we're in the game. And it's kind of slow. Normally it's not this slow. I'm pretty sure it's because I'm recording. We can just run through a game if you want. He wants to do a level 85. I haven't played this for a while, so I'm not sure if I can do a level 85. Yeah, I definitely would not recommend doing this if you're really trying to play. This is super slow while recording. Alright, so far, I'm not seeing any screen tearing. But, yeah, this is way too slow to play while recording. I'll just go through the entire game because I don't want to be a jerk and leave the game in the middle of a rift. It's like bad game sportsmanship or something. At least in Diablo 3. Dang, I died again. I used to play this game all the time. Haven't played it for a really long time. Well, we whooped him, didn't we? I don't think I can even pick up any of this stuff because my inventory is like at max capacity. Yeah.
I need to go back.
So anyway, I'll cut the video short here, but yeah, that gives you a kind of an idea. All right, so I wanted to show the benchmarks for this before I switched over to the Nvidia card. So this is still the AMD card. Now I played around with this at 4K, did pretty terrible. It wasn't terrible. It was still playable, but it was like really a little too glitchy for my taste. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could probably play it at 4K. At 1440p, at lower settings, it was good. 1080p, perfectly fine. So we'll just continue. And so this is one of the best AAA games that Linux has that I know of. And figured it would be a good example to show gaming performance. So now I was comparing the desktop performance before this. So now I wanted to check out the gaming performance. It does take a little while to load. All right. So when I was using this earlier, before.
Jonah, I'm out. Be careful, the way into the site is full of traps.
Trinity's not done with it yet.
They're protecting something.
6 weeks. Still no solid leads on who's leading the local Trinity cell. But I talked to some people in town. They're excited. There's a VIP coming to the Day of the Dead. Name's the big game. We should look into it.
So as I was saying, before I was using OBS, I was getting pretty much 60 frames. I can show you the settings really quick. Now obviously this isn't super intense, but it's 1920 by 1200. And then we can up it a little bit. You'll see the difference. I got VSync on, which if you don't turn that on, you're going to get a little bit of tearing. I have this AMD Fidelity FX CAS, which is like upscaling. And yeah, so let's turn it up a little bit, 1440p, and you can see the difference. So as you can see, the frames dropped a little bit at 1440p, but not too bad really. Still not 60. When you're moving around, it's not super fluid, but it's not bad. And this is at pretty high settings. I didn't show you the settings, but we can go back to that. And then, so these are all the settings. We have texture quality as ultra, shadow quality is high, and lighting is on, lens flares, screen effects on. Level of detail is ultra. So overall, I mean, I'll show you the 4K version, and we'll apply those changes. And as you can see, the 4K version, it looks really good, but we dropped down to about 25, and as you can see, it's really glitchy. And I mean, I can switch back and forth without using OBS. This will be at like 30 frames. So this is the 580, which is a pretty old graphics card, but yeah, not the best. And I mean, if we change some of the options, we'll display and graphics. We'll go down to the lowest we can go, which kind of defeats the purpose in some ways, I think, but whatever. Still, it actually kind of got worse when you use that preset. But everything looks really crisp like that. Oh, it's at highest somehow. I thought it was at lowest. Oh, I said restore defaults, that's one. Okay, so this is 4K at the lowest, my bad. So still pretty much the same, even with the lower quality textures. As you can see, there's not really any screen tearing, but if you want to get 60 frames, you're gonna have to go to probably about 1440p, maybe. And if you keep all this stuff at the lowest, you can play at 1440p pretty well. But I don't really like how that looks. Some of the textures kind of pop in and out of existence. So I kind of like to keep the texture quality ultra and level of detail ultra, and then just leave it at that at 1440p, and that gets pretty good results. It's better when I'm not using OBS. So for one 580, this graphics card costs $100. You get pretty decent 1440p gaming experience for $100. Pretty sweet. Now, in terms of this versus the desktop, that's something different. So I'll just back out of this game. I'm going to put in the Nvidia card now, and we can, test out the desktop experience, and we'll test out this game to kind of get an idea of the feel of things. Okay, so you guys can see right now, this is the Nvidia card, and I have settings pulled up right here, and as you can see, everything looks pretty good actually. Let me pull up. One thing you'll notice is I didn't change any of the KDE plasma settings, but it's just the text is larger. So obviously different graphics cards are going to display things differently, and I guess this is one of those intricacies of it. But as you can see here, my Nvidia driver is 440.64, and let's just go to the VBlank settings, sync to VBlank. Okay, so it shouldn't be tearing, and right now it seems to be doing pretty well. But one of the problems is, right now we have it set, well, let's go to the compositor. Go to the compositor, and right now it's set to it's all the same settings as the AMD card. Okay? So everything's all the same settings. And we'll launch Tyranny, just like we did before. And I'm recording, I'm doing all the exact same things. We'll launch Tyranny. Taking quite a while to launch here. There we go. All right, there we go. So we'll continue where we left off, just like we did before. And one of the things that I didn't really record is when the system's booting up, since it's booting from the kernel on the AMD card, it immediately sets the resolution to the correct resolution, even on the boot screen. When system deboots, going through all its processes, loading everything. It's 1440. Well, it's at 4K resolution. But with the Nvidia card, it takes a little bit longer for it to set it to 4K. So a few differences. Now, if everything goes well, then we're not going to see any screen tearing, but if anything goes wrong, we're going to see a bunch of screen tearing because it's going to crash. And this is what I see all the time. It's very unreliable. And that's kind of the reason why I decided to get this $100 card, because pretty much I only need Nvidia for some CUDA stuff, maybe. That's for more of machine learning, AI related tasks. I was going to try ROCm, which I'll put into another video. Like ROCm versus Nvidia's CUDA with maybe TensorFlow or PyTorch if they have those options, and kind of compare the two. But for this video, just stick to this, desktop environment, games, closing, reloading them, what happens in between those two processes. And loading is just insanely slow. For the games, I have all my games stored actually on a spinning disk. It's a 4 terabyte spinning disk. I think it's 7,200 RPMs, but it's still really slow. My operating system boot disk is an NVMe. It's an Intel NVMe. So yeah, just keep that in mind. That's probably one of the reasons why this is so slow. But same settings on both configurations. I think the only thing that's maybe changed is I got a newer kernel. So we're going back and forth, and it's a little bit jittery, but actually it looks, looks okay. I think the jitteriness is because of OBS, right? So we go back to options, graphics, and we have VSync enabled. This is 4K at 60 Hertz. Okay, so everything's the same. Seems to be doing well, right? Well, I mean, usually it'd be a lot smoother if I wasn't using OBS, but no tearing is what I'm saying. Okay, so that's good. So we'll get out of here, exit to desktop, and this is where usually I have a problem. Not always, but sometimes. So usually you'll see some screen tearing, and the fonts will get blurry. Doesn't look like that happened. So let me launch. Well, I think you name all. So as you can see, I'm running a mainline kernel from the Ubuntu repos, 5.6.5. So it's a lot newer than what's usually released. Maybe that solved the problems that I was having before. I'm not really sure. I am also, well, here I'll show you. I'm on Ubuntu 20.04. I just upgraded. So there's a chance we got some fixes and it's not going to crash. But I'm not going to hold my breath. Let me go back to the main area. We'll launch Tomb Raider. I used Tomb Raider in the AMD test. I'm going to use Nvidia in this test, and we'll see how it goes. Except, let's go to my games folder. Go to Steam Apps, Common. I mean, as you guys can see, it's really slow. Spinning disks. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, there we go. Go to the bin, and I'll launch this with Mango HUD just like I did on AMD. Go to Shadow. Okay. So we're launching it basically the same. As you can see down here, P sensors, the temperature of the cards are basically the same, after coming in and out of different things, doing basic things. FPS at the start of it. It's pretty much the same. Now this is a much more graphically intense game, so if we are going to run into problems with the compositor breaking, this would probably be where it's going to happen. Because, I mean, that's the main reason why I went with this. I wanted to pick up this card. I wanted to eliminate the screen tearing and breaking. I was just really annoyed by it, and yeah. But if the Nvidia card is able to not have the screen tearing, well, I guess I didn't need to get this card. It's literally, that's the problem with these softwares. You know, one moment you can have an update and it fixes everything. But still, that speaks volumes, I think, to AMD, that because they have that open source card, it eliminates a lot of the problems. And I can already tell with these settings, we're getting pretty good frame rates if it holds to this. It'd be so nice to get a 4 terabyte SSD. It's just too bad they cost like $400. Okay, here we go. So we're at the high 60s, so like almost 70 frames per second.
Jonah, I'm out. Be careful, the way into the site is full of traps.
Trinity's not done with it yet.
They're protecting something.
6 weeks, and still no solid leads on who's leading the local Trinity cell. But I talked to some people.
So we're doing actually into the 70s and 80s sometimes, but it drops down quite a bit. It's not quite as consistent as the AMD card, but it does get much higher and stays pretty high in the high 60s or 70s. But let's go to display and graphics. Yeah, we're at 1080p right now. So 1080p is very, very low. Let's turn VSync on. And obviously the AMD, we'll turn that on, although I'm not really sure it's going to do anything. We don't have an AMD card. And we'll put this up to 1440p. Okay, so as you can see, let's go to the graphics. It's on the highest, which is pretty good. But we're getting about 30, okay? And this is pretty much what we were seeing with the AMD card. It's stuttering. We're not getting a ton of screen tearing when we move around, so that's good. I don't know if it's going to break or not later on. Let's go and drop it down to what we had it before. I'll start with the lowest. I'll turn this on to ultra. I had the shadow quality turned on to high. I had the level of detail set on to ultra. I think volumetric lighting, I think I had that on too, right? Alright, so that's basically what we had before at 1440p. And we're getting, it's pretty smooth. It's smoother than on the AMD card, but not by a lot, because it's still kind of jerky. But it's because it's like it's going up to 60, but then it's dropping all the way down to 40s. And on the AMD card, we weren't getting as consistent highs, that's for sure. But I'm not noticing that huge of a difference, to be honest. The screen tearing is non-existent, which is good. Maybe the new kernel fixed it. I'm not complaining. we'll go up to 4K, and we'll see what that does now. I expect this to really be slow. And it's pretty much sticking to 30. Which is pretty good. We're playing 4K on a 1070 at about 30 frames per second. Which, you know, if you're playing on console, that's, you know, that would have been considered okay on some consoles. And then you can see the detail, it's pretty good. Okay, so now let's test the screen tearing, let's test the compositor, let's see if things crash. I'm gonna Alt-Tab out. Alt-Tab back in. Okay, so that's a direct comparison, and I'm going to say the Nvidia card does edge a little bit better against the AMD 580. And the thing is I think release time, these cards were released pretty close. I'm going to have to look on that, but they were released pretty close to the same time. And this card is a bit cheaper. It's quite a bit cheaper than the Nvidia card. So I wouldn't call it, you know, a huge win for Nvidia. But if you can find an Nvidia 1070 for $120, then I would say pick it up, you know, versus the 580. But if you have the option to pick up a 580 for $100 and your budget is really dependent on it, you want to get maybe a better CPU or more RAM. I mean, just depends on what your priorities are. Okay, so it looks like compositing broke. You can tell right here in the text, it looks really blurry. Let me open up a terminal. Yeah, and you can see that it kind of stuttered. We're getting screen artifacts. This is Nvidia. This is what I was talking about. And it's just so unreliable. I mean, if I got out of the game, got back in the game, restart my computer, then everything would be fine again. And I could go in and play and use my desktop. And if I didn't go into a game, then everything would probably be okay. But it's just, this is so annoying that it's almost like I'm just going to stick with the AMD card because it's open source, and that will be the AMD card will be my main card for, you know, my daily usage. And if I do want to play a game, most of the games that I play, you know, I don't need to play in 4K because it's like Tyranny. I can play Tyranny in 4K, or I can play Baldur's Gate in, you know, whatever setting that it has. And it's not going to really matter that much. But I really don't want to deal with the compositor breakages, and I still want to have that cool fluid motion. I mean, what if I wanted to go into edit my profile, appearances, I'll go into here, and what if I wanted to have blur, right? Well, if your compositor breaks, sometimes it breaks this blur. You won't just get these blurry fonts at the top, which right now it seems like it's kind of working again. So it's just kind of like, it's really weird, you know? It'll work and then it won't work. But as you can see, the card temperatures, they're basically the same. We do have this green line. We didn't have that on the AMD card because P sensors, I didn't set it up to detect the temperature of the AMD card yet. But I did set it up for the 1070. But I mean, anyway, the CPU is what I was really going off of, which is what the temperature is right here. And it is, you know, I would say hotter on the Nvidia card when you're running. The CPU is getting hotter. But, you know, it's not by much, so I wouldn't let, you know, unless you have like some very compact build, I wouldn't be worried about that to begin with. But yeah. I mean, you saw that artifacting when I moved the screen. Something's wrong with the compositor. It wasn't doing this in Nvidia. I mean, the AMD card. And, you know, it's not like I'm not an AMD fanboy. I do like the fact that it's open source. That's awesome just because I don't have to mess with it. It just comes preloaded with my kernel, and I'm off and running. So that's really awesome to me. But, yeah, I don't want to deal with the compositor breaking. If I'm getting, you know, 5 or 10 frames, even 15 frames more, that's not worth it to me if my entire desktop is going to crash or my compositor is going to break, you know? And I mean, even on GNOME, I would get screen tearing on GNOME. Even for simple things like opening up the application menu, full screen application menu. If you did that, you'd notice like a little bit of screen tearing. The icons, they usually come up in like this very simple animation. And when they come up with that animation, it would look slow and kind of janky. And that's with the Nvidia card. So, yeah. I don't think anything has changed with the 2000 series. And, you know, I'm not sure anything's going to change, to be honest. Because I think Nvidia, they only care about one thing when it comes to Linux. And that's deep learning, machine learning. And if it's gaming related, maybe they'll fix it, maybe they won't. I'm not going to act like I'm, you know, educated. I haven't gone and interviewed any of the Nvidia employees or the CEO or anything like that. So I don't know for sure, but this is just my perception, is that this bug of the compositor breaking, right? I mean, I want to see some screen tearing, compositor breakages. This bug has been filed for over 5 years. I posted on, you know, KDE's bug reporting software fabricator. I posted on the forum, and still, Nvidia's forum, and still no fixes. So I think this proves a point. I'm not sure what point it proves for you guys, but for me, it just proves the point that I made a smart purchase when I bought this for $100. It's going to be much more reliable, and if I do need the Nvidia card, I'll leave it in the system because I have two. I have the Gigabyte Gaming 7 X399 motherboard, and it has two PCIe by 16 slots. So I can keep both cards in there. I do have a server rack with other systems. If I wanted to, I could put that Nvidia card into one of the servers and, you know, use it as exactly what I wanted to use it as, is an easy way to run any TensorFlow models and things like that, because I was doing the self-driving car program from Udacity. But yeah, I just wanted to make this video because I really like the fact that AMD works really well, and I think this is something that not a lot of people win over. You know, they always go over like Phoronix. You know, I love Phoronix. I contributed money to keep Michael doing his work. I like going to his website and, you know, looking at all his articles that he's made. But when you're going through it, you don't notice all these little bugs, right? When you're going through all those benchmarks, you might think like, oh, NVIDIA's awesome. I'm going to get more performance for my dollar. But you don't know all these little bugs that you're going to run into. So that was kind of really my point of making this video, is that it's not all about frames per second. It also is about your experience using it. Is it going to start to be all janky and get messed up? To be honest, though, the screen tearing is pretty good, even with the compositor, you know, being messed up. Usually the screen tearing is much worse. So, hey, maybe they're going to fix this. Keep your eyes peeled. If they fix it, then, you know, you can make a different decision. But for me, I think it just feels better to use AMD because I know it's open source, and other developers that are going to be looking at the code, the graphics stack, they're going to be able to fix problems a lot easier and get things integrated with, you know, Wayland, move away from Xorg, and all that other thing. So yeah, I just wanted to, leave that with you guys and let you guys, consider that. All right, I'll catch you later. Bye. All right. So I'm starting recording again because as soon as I stopped recording, we got the very, very blurry screen tearing. I'm sure you guys could see that. Like, it's very bad. You're getting these artifacts in the video. As soon as I stop this, the screen blur on the fonts and everything is going to be so terrible. So, yeah. And that's not even talking about all the other slowness and flickering and stuff like that. But anyway, I'll catch you guys later.